led the effort to pass biennial Water Resources Development Act legislation, known as WRDA, with overwhelming bipartisan support. Last Congress, the Senate passed WRDA 2022, as you'll recall, by a vote of 93 to 1. We don't see margins like that every day in the U.S. Senate. They never see days like that in the U.S. House. I say that lovingly as a former House member. Having said that, though, there is a pattern that we want to continue. That is a pattern we want to continue to replicate. Timely, bipartisan reauthorization, resulting in sound policies to address our nation's critical water resource needs in the face of increasingly powerful storms, devastating floods, and more intense and frequent droughts. I am proud of the work done by all of our EPW colleagues, by our staffs in making this goal a reality. I'm especially grateful to Ranking Member Capito for her partnership we have forged with her and with her talented team on all things WRDA. And when it comes to this committee, WRDA is a shining example of the bipartisanship that is too often overlooked on Capitol Hill these days. This past fall, Senator Capito and I received more than, at our request, we received more than 1,200 requests from our colleagues in the Senate from north to south and east to west for consideration in WRDA 2024. I believe that might set a new record. And since then, we have been diligently reviewing these priorities with the court, and we have identified some consistent themes. First, communities are asking for core projects to be more affordable. Second, the non-federal sponsors are seeking more flexibility when working with the Corps. And third, communities are asking for core projects to do more to address extreme weather and climate change. To many of us, these are all too familiar topics, and that's because in the past several reauthorizations, we've made historic changes to core policy to address these very issues. We've made cost share more favorable for underserved and for tribal communities. We have given the Corps authority to review their contracting procedures, and we've directed the Corps to consider the impacts of climate change in just about everything that you do. So one might ask, why are we still seeing these WRDA requests in 2024 if we've already addressed these problems, or at least attempted to? Well, while the last three WRDA bills have been transformative, implementation of these laws is taking longer than expected. In some cases, a good deal longer. We need to better understand how we can help the Corps implement these laws more expeditiously. As many on this committee have heard me say probably too often, everything I do, I know I can do better. I think that's true of all of us, even the Navy, even the Army. And that same principle applies here with respect to this legislation. To be fair, the Corps has begun to make some meaningful progress. 2 weeks ago, I was pleased to learn that the Corps announced a regulatory proposal to revise its principles, requirements, and guidelines. Historically, the Corps has relied too much on an oversimplified cost-to-benefit ratio in its decision-making process, which has sometimes undercut crucial community and ecosystem needs. This new regulatory proposal makes major strides to elevate the best available science throughout the Corps' decision-making processes, and goes a long way toward building community resilience to climate change. I hope to see that rulemaking process move forward and as swiftly as possible. I do recognize that implementation of Congress's recent WRDA bills, including rulemaking for the principles, requirements, and guidelines, takes time, but the clock is ticking. And we are feeling the acute impacts of climate change across our nation, from the drought in the west to sea level rise on the Gulf Coast to floods from the snowpack melt in the Midwest. Without intervention, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration estimates that the threat of sea level rise is going to accelerate, not diminish, in the next 30 years. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, approximately 40% of the U.S. population, 40% of the U.S. population lives within 100 miles of a coastline. That means that more than 130 million people who live in coastal counties, including all of Delaware, much of Maryland, much of Virginia, the Carolinas, all the way down to Florida, and states to the north and south of us. Frankly, just about everybody on this committee is included. These states are included in the threat that's posed by rising sea levels. So we need to continue working with partners like the Corps in addressing the impacts of climate change. And while this slow progress we've seen from the Corps on this front is better than no progress, it's my hope that today's discussion will be an opportunity for us to learn more about what has caused the delays in implementation and how we can make sure that these historic bills have the transformative impact that Congress intends, and I think you want as well. Senator Capito and I are in agreement that WRDA 2024 will focus on individual project solutions. I'll say that again. Senator Capito and our teams are in agreement that the WRDA 24 will focus on individual project solutions, giving the Corps the ability to dedicate more time, additional resources to fully implement the changes we've already made in past pieces of legislation. General Spellmon and Secretary Connor, we look forward to hearing your testimony and insights today. We always look forward to hearing your testimony and to working with you and your team. Thank you for joining us, and thanks as well to the men and women that you lead today. Some are in the room, most are not. They're spread out across the country. Before we hear your testimony, though, I want to turn it over to our ranking member, Senator Capito, for any comments that she would like to make. Senator Capito, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Carper. Thanks for having the meeting, and we're working well, I think, towards keeping the record of reauthorizing WRDA every 2 years. Secretary Connor and General Spellmon, wonderful to have you with us here today. You might recall the last time you were both before the committee, we discussed a project that was incredibly exciting from my home state of West Virginia, and that is the Nucor steel plant in Mason County. Once the plant begins commercial operation, it will employ hundreds of full-time employees in an area where jobs are desperately needed. I want to take a moment to thank you, your staffs, and the team at the Huntington District for your assistance and personal attention to this project. I am pleased to say that Nucor broke ground on the site last October, and this would not have been possible without your support and hard work. I will say, just for the audience listening, and you all probably know this, at the groundbreaking, a Guinness Book of World Records was broken. It was the largest groundbreaking ever with 545 shovels. So look it up in your Guinness book. It was very exciting for the community. Every high school senior was there with a shovel. Since 2014, the committee has kept its biennial schedule of passing bipartisan legislation that authorizes water resources studies and projects. WRDA, as we know it, also sets national priorities for our Civil Works program at the U.S. Corps of Engineers. I look forward to continuing that track record, as I stated earlier. Last year, Chairman Carper and I, and he mentioned this in his opening statement, sent a letter to our Senate colleagues collecting their request for WRDA 2024. I must say, WRDA 2024 is becoming very popular. I'm pleased to say that we received a significant number of requests, many more than last time, which demonstrates, I think, the strong interest but also the necessity of this legislation. As the chairman and I have both said repeatedly, WRDA 2024 will not be a policy-heavy bill. Instead, the legislation will focus on authorizing new or modifying existing studies and projects, as well as making much-needed technical changes in prior provisions in order to better reflect the intent of Congress. This limited scope will enable the Corps to focus the energy and resources on fully implementing prior WRDA provisions, which will ensure that the agency continues to be responsive to water resource needs. As I've previously stated, it's important that any WRDA bill supports the timely and efficient delivery of water resources projects while continuing to meet national priorities. Flexibility, we've heard this on over and over again, is key to ensuring that the Corps can identify and carry out solutions that are tailored to the needs of each individual community. We must also continue to preserve the role of non-federal sponsors in this project and maintain the Corps' focus on its primary mission of navigation, flood, and coastal storm risk management and ecosystem restoration. I'd like to extend my appreciation to the staff of the Corps as the chairman stated, many of them, some here and many all across the country, for their engagement with the committee as we oversee the implementation of WRDA 2022 and also prior WRDAs. However, I am concerned about the Corps' fulfillment of some of these provisions. As ranking member, one of my 2 priorities across the committee's jurisdiction is improving the environmental review and permitting processes for all types of infrastructure projects, while not sacrificing important environmental provisions. These processes need to move forward in a timely and productive manner so that the committee can realize the benefits of these projects for a whole lot of reasons. I'm proud that WRDA 2022 contained a provision that furthers this goal, which is NEPA reporting. Unfortunately, more than a year after enactment, this important provision is still not implemented. Earlier this month, the Corps informed the committee that it will need an additional $3 million to set up the reporting system, and another system, which WRDA 2014, that's 10 years ago, also needs another $2.5 million a year to maintain these systems. Recent WRDAs have also included provisions designed to reduce the financial burden on non-federal sponsors in economically disadvantaged communities. Much of my home state of West Virginia qualifies as economically disadvantaged and could benefit from these provisions. Regrettably, some of these provisions have not been fully implemented or even begun, which means critical projects are not moving forward. It was clear from my Senate colleague request that many of the provisions in prior WRDAs are also facing delays and obstacles. This hearing, in part, is part of the committee's ongoing oversight of the Corps and the agency's efforts to carry out these laws. We will closely examine whether or not the Corps has made the implementation of certain provisions needlessly more complicated than Congress intended them to be. I look forward to discussing all of these issues in more detail with our witnesses. Today, we will also learn about the Corps' priorities for WRDA 2024. I'll be particularly interested in which priorities require legislative language and which can be carried out through existing authorities. Secretary Connor and General Spellmon, again, thank you for your continued commitment and transparency and accountability and accessibility, I need to add that, and as well as your insights into these matters. I also want to thank and acknowledge the staff across the Corps enterprise for their efforts to provide the committee with technical assistance on various WRDA requests that we receive from our Senate colleagues. The technical assistance is a vital part of our legislative process, and we greatly appreciate the responses. The work of the Corps has and will continue to make a difference in communities all across the country, particularly in my state. I would like to take a moment of personal privilege here to acknowledge a sad thing for our committee, certainly for my side of the aisle, but also for the chairman's as well. One of my great staff members, Travis Cohn, who is my deputy staff director. This is his last meeting, his last week. He's easily identifiable because he's one with the red hair and red beard, who's sitting right behind me. Travis has served on my staff for 7 years and leads the environment team on the committee's Republican staff. He will be leaving the committee later this week. He will really be missed, not only as a great talent, but also as a good friend to so many. His expertise and dedication have contributed to a number of legislative successes, especially the committee's historic drinking water legislation. So Travis, I want to thank you for your outstanding work. For me, the only big negative about Travis is, now I'm a Duke Blue Devil and he's a Kentucky Wildcat. So we've had a few problems with that. I can declare which blue I think is superior, but we don't get into it much. But anyway, I'd like to have a round of applause for a great guy.
I'm Tom Carper, and I approve that message. Travis, we're going to miss you, buddy. Good luck. Prayer winds and following sea. Some of you know I go back and forth on the train. I live in Delaware and go back and forth on the train a lot. And people are very kind to me ever since I announced I wasn't going to run for re-election. People are so kind. And they ask me, how's your retirement going? And I say, oh, I'm not retired yet. I don't retire till high noon, January 3rd, 2025. And I'm still in the saddle, and there's plenty to do. And the senators, all the senators that are here today and those that aren't, no, we've got a lot on our plates to work on and to keep us busy until that date. It's easy to introduce legislation. It's fairly easy to introduce bipartisan legislation. It's fairly easy to get in this hearing, committee hearing, reasonable hearing, and eventually to move from hearings to bringing legislation to the floor, maybe passing it in the Senate, and maybe finding a companion legislation in the House, and then finding a way to compromise and the president to sign it into law. That's regular order. And we're pretty good at regular order. We're really good at it in this committee. But another big part of our job is implementation. And between now and high noon, January 3rd, 2025, we're going to be focused as well on implementation, and we should be. And I look forward to doing that. I look forward to doing that. Now, I think I mentioned earlier, I'm going to say this again, Senator Capito, in our agreement, that Water 24 will focus on individual project solutions, giving the Corps the ability to dedicate more time and resources to fully implement the changes we've already made in past bills. And again, to our two witnesses today, we look forward to hearing your testimony, look forward to working with you toward that end. Now let's turn to our witnesses. Assistant Secretary Connor has served in a variety of positions. I reread those last night. It was pretty impressive, very impressive. Variety of positions in the federal government, focusing on natural and water resources throughout much of your career. He was confirmed as the Assistant Secretary of the Army in 2021, I think in November, as I recall it. Advises the Secretary of the Army on all matters that pertain to the Army's Civil Works program. And with that having been said, Secretary Connor, you are recognized for your statement. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Capito, distinguished members. Very much appreciate the opportunity to discuss the Army's priorities for WRDA 2024. Very much appreciate the concept of a policy-light WRDA 2024, because we do need to catch up and implement the very good provisions that you've enacted. My written statement has been submitted for the record and identifies actions to implement the last two WRDAs, as well as priorities for the Army Civil Works program. The testimony speaks for itself, so I'll use my time to quickly describe a visit I made to Hawaii last week, which I think is relevant to a number of the issues we're going to discuss today. My trip included reviewing a range of civil works missions being carried out in Hawaii, including disaster response, flood risk management, beneficial use of dredge material, and aquatic ecosystem restoration, all of which involved economically disadvantaged communities. A few takeaways. Most significant, the Army Corps of Engineers continues to be at its best when called upon to work with FEMA and other agencies to respond to emergencies and disaster situations. In Maui, where the communities of Lahaina and Kula were devastated by wildfire, the Corps, using tools and new direction provided in recent WRDAs, worked hard to understand cultural sensitivities and is now gaining trust with the Native Hawaiian community to more effectively carry out its debris removal mission, which will set the stage for rebuilding on the 1,600-plus properties damaged or devastated by the wildfires. In addition, using local contractors and strong collaboration with local authorities, it moved quickly with remarkable focus and effort to carry out its responsibilities for critical infrastructure, to construct a temporary, and I got to tell you from firsthand tour, very impressive elementary school in 95 days, completed just last week to allow the local school district in Lahaina to return elementary school-aged children in this impacted community to some semblance of normalcy, with classes starting in the new facility on April 1st.
What grade levels would that include?
That's elementary school, so it's K through 6.
All right, thanks.
There are other response actions being carried out and much more work to be done overall, but the bottom line is that the Corps continues to evolve and modernize how it works with different communities, which in Maui is resulting in our team becoming integrated within the community and may ultimately lead to a transition from response to rebuilding, and thus improving the resilience of Maui using a number of tools and authorities provided in recent WRDAs. Second, like elsewhere, the Corps is carrying out an increasing civil works workload in Hawaii, including a traditional large-scale flood risk project in Oahu. The Auauwe project is as complicated as any flood risk management project in the Corps' portfolio, particularly where we are trying to retrofit modern flood risk management strategies into a highly developed area with little open and undeveloped land to work with. These large, complicated projects with significant public interest and involvement in complex hydrology do not necessarily lend themselves to a standard 3x3x3 feasibility study, and we appreciate the dialogue with committee staff about how that process may need to evolve, particularly with new challenges and new tools, such as Section 8106 of WRDA 2022. Finally, I would note that I toured and met with local sponsors involved in 2 smaller CAP projects and a beneficial use of dredge material pilot. These types of projects are of increasing importance as they represent a scale that can yield good results with affordable levels of investment for non-federal sponsors. And they also represent innovations for communities trying to maximize multiple benefits in each and every project, no matter the size. Moreover, in each of those situations, the sponsors stressed the incredible need for these projects given the increasing risk from a more dynamic climate creating larger precipitation events as well as stronger storm surge and sea level rise. While small, each of these projects have challenges that the Army Corps is working through, as anticipated with pilots and new authorities, that are critical to deliver on the need and the expectations of these respective communities. My overall point is that the work of this committee has been incredibly important in continuing to improve how the Corps can extend its reach to a broader set of communities, continue to innovate, and develop unique new engineering solutions to new challenges. The Chief and I appreciate the ongoing opportunity to work closely with the committee in using these new authorities and the substantial resources now in hand through the bipartisan infrastructure law, disaster supplementals, and annual appropriations to advance the President's Investing in America agenda and the vision for an increasingly responsive Army Civil Works program. Looking forward, please know that we will continue to work closely with you and your staff in developing the next WRDA to ensure we have the tools, processes, and resources in place to, 1, better assess risks and innovate our approach to effectively address those risks, 2, improve our processes to appropriately and equitably serve a broader set of communities, and 3, develop projects for consideration by Congress that provide multiple benefits, have community acceptance, and include well-developed cost estimates. Thanks for the time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Secretary Connor. Now to introduce General Spellmon, who's been introduced here many times in the past. It's good to see you again. I understand you've been serving as the 55th Chief of Engineers and the Commanding General of the Army Corps of Engineers since September 2020. Is that right? 2020? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Which, before that, you served as the Deputy Commanding General for Civil and Emergency Operations. You are no stranger to us, and you're no stranger to the Corps Civil Works program that's so important for this committee. So we're grateful for your service. Look forward to hearing from you today. So please begin your statement. Thank you.
Chairman Carper and Ranking Member Capito and distinguished members of the committee, I'm honored to testify before you today and thank you for the opportunity to discuss current implementation of recent Water Resource Development Acts, as well as future water resource legislation. But before I do that, I do want to start out with a sincere thank you. I have come before this committee several times over the past 6 years, and I've always shared that these are historic times for the Army Corps of Engineers, and I know that's probably starting to sound rote to the committee members by now. But I keep repeating that phrase because they seem to get more historic as every week and month goes by for us. The Secretary just mentioned Maui, and I appreciate his kind words there. That's very hard and rewarding work for the team. But our programs in disaster response, military construction for the Army and Air Force, the work we're doing for the Veterans Administration, the work we're doing for the combatant commanders in 110 countries around the globe, and some of our teams building very difficult projects in combat zones today, and certainly the Civil Works program here at home, we are seeing record levels of appropriation that we have just not experienced in our 249-year history. And it's that record level of investment that has brought new workload challenges to my agency, some that we have just not countered previously. And I know we're going to talk about some of those challenges today. There are challenges that we are committed to working through. And so an opening thank you to the members of the committee and all the staff members sitting on the wall behind you who are helping us work our way through this massive workload. But back to WRDA. In WRDA 22, Congress authorized 25 new construction projects, 94 new feasibility studies, and 131 new environmental infrastructure projects. This legislation continued the trend of advancing our mission by enabling critical policy transformations to address the changing needs of the nation's water resource infrastructure. That legislation provided the Corps flexibility to design projects that respond to a wider suite of impacts associated with climate change, addressing the needs of our small, rural, and disadvantaged communities, as well as supporting our tribal partners with enhanced flexibilities. One of our priorities, the Secretary and I, has been to expand the breadth of our research and development capabilities. So I wanted to thank this committee again for the authorization of a separate R&D account for the Corps in WRDA 2022, and like R&D account like many other federal agencies enjoy. We've been working hard to enhance our knowledge in new and innovative technologies such as natural and nature-based solutions, crowdsourced bathymetry, achieving a better understanding of the sources and controls for challenges like sea level rise and harmful algal blooms, as well as many, many other initiatives. These R&D efforts bring new, powerful capabilities to the Corps and also enhance the Army's overall modernization efforts. I take very seriously our responsibility to regulate the development of waters of the United States, including wetlands. Today, in our regulatory program, we employ 1,300 staff members. In fiscal year 23, these professionals processed 43,235 Section 404 and Section 10 permits, and we rendered just over 31,000 of those permits within our on-time standard, or 70%. And while that figure is significant, we know it's not good enough. We are on a slightly better track with the 15,000 plus permits that we've processed to date this fiscal year, and we know we have more work to do. We continue to seek ways to improve our timeliness with continued investments in our regulatory viewer, which is in the field now, in our regulatory request system, which will go fully online at the end of March. These new tools are already helping our applicants better understand permitting requirements and assisting our regulators' analysis so they can make more timely and efficient decisions in the field. As mentioned, we remain laser-focused on executing record levels of regular and supplemental emergency funding that we've received over the past 5 years. In fiscal year 23, the Corps obligated $40.7 billion, $18 billion in the Civil Works program, and this is the second highest program delivery again in our 249-year history. And this progress could not have happened without the tools and authorities given to us by this committee and by Congress. So I believe we have good momentum in fiscal year 24. I will conclude by saying we do not accomplish any of this on our own. Delivering successful civil works projects, it's a shared responsibility, it's a team sport, and I look forward to continuing our great collaboration as we face the challenges of today and tomorrow. And thank you again, Chairman Carper and Ranking Member Capito. We look forward to your questions.
Thank you both for your testimony. And I'm going to lead that off and then turn to Senator Capito. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, we need to consider the status of implementing past WRDA bills while the committee develops WRDA 2024. And unfortunately, implementation is taking longer, in some cases much longer, than Congress expected, sometimes spanning multiple administrations. Of the more than 1,200 requests this committee received for the 2024 WRDA legislation, roughly half relate back to provisions from prior WRDAs that have not been fully implemented. There are multiple examples of provisions where implementation has not occurred, and that means congressional direction, well, to be blunt about it, has been ignored. This includes federal interest determination studies for small, rural, and disadvantaged communities, changes to the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund to support expanded uses, and numerous provisions supporting the use of natural infrastructure to make projects more resilient to climate change, among others. Question, if I could, we'll start with General Spellmon with you and then with the Secretary. Both of you testified before this committee that WRDA implementation is a top priority. What is the current process for implementing WRDA legislation after passage? And in your view, what is the cause for delays in implementing too many of the prior WRDA provisions? General Spellmon.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. First of all, I concur with you. There are delays. I would disagree with the characterization that these provisions are being ignored. Two primary causes for the delays from my seat. First is one of timing. So WRDA 22 passed in December of 22. I had already turned in my budget recommendation for fiscal year 24 to the Secretary 90 days prior in September of that year. So when a WRDA bill passes in December, this next WRDA bill, it'll be fiscal year 26 before I can work those provisions into our budget. The second challenge is making it all fit within a budget top line. So things like investigations, environmental infrastructure, ecosystem restoration, a lot of great provisions, but making all of that fit into a budget top line has been incredibly challenging for us. And people like me have just got to make a better recommendation to the Secretary when we take our budget recommendations forward. But I would tell you that we are using other sources of funds where they are needed. I'll just give you a few examples. 8113, Columbia River Tribal Housing, we're moving out with funding that we receive and great support from the 3 tribes out there moving forward with that program. 8116, workforce planning, not relying on civil works funds. We received $9 million in DOD to enable better retention and recruitment initiatives, and we're leading DOD in that effort. So you helped me personally on 8125, the ability to assign warrant officers and NCOs to our civil works projects. The Secretary is going to give us implementation guidance, how we will fund that. Right now, we have the Army's agreement to fund them out of OMA funds. We have our first 3 civil works warrant officers on hydroelectric plants out in the Pacific Northwest today. The 8141 harmful algal bloom reporting. I sent my surgeon to Lake Okeechobee, Florida. That system is already in place. 8303, we're moving out aggressively on FIRO for 4 projects out in California and Washington State. We're ready for more. And then 8351, another example of sturgeon habitat projects on the Missouri River, using existing funds to get those designs in. We want to get those in the river. Again, you said it, sir, we are not perfect. There is a lot of work we can continue to do to get better. We will keep pressing, but we are committed to it.
Good. Before I ask Secretary to also share some thoughts as to the cause for delays in implementing the prior WRDA provisions, I would note that some of the delays that we're talking about don't just they date back to WRDA 22. They date back as far as 2007, which is just not acceptable. Rather, Secretary Connor, your thoughts, if you will, it'd be fairly brief, but for the causes for the delays in implementing prior WRDA provisions.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thanks for the opportunity. Notwithstanding the distance between us, I assure you I subscribe completely to his comments because we talk about this on a daily, weekly basis and work very closely together. So I endorse everything General Spellmon just said. A couple other quick thoughts for you. When we have control of our own destiny with respect to implementing guidance to move forward with WRDA provisions, we have done so and we try and do so expeditiously. Once again, we could improve, absolutely. I think we've done 31 of 35 from WRDA 2020, done 6 of the 12 guidance needs with respect to WRDA 2022. It's when we kind of move outside that area and have to go through something's deemed significant guidance, federal world, and the public too, to move forward and fully implement. A couple examples from WRDA 2020. We defined economically disadvantaged communities. We had to go through significant guidance, notice, and comment to do that. We completed that. Then we moved forward to try and use that definition to implement 2 pilot projects that you all authorized, which were, 118, flood investigations at 100% federal cost, and 165, CAP projects. We're moving forward with 165, and I hope we can make announcements here in the next month or so. With 118, that was deemed significant guidance even after we already did significant guidance on the definition of economically disadvantaged communities. So I'm in a delay situation because of the processes that we set up. I didn't think that was significant. We argued against that. We lost. These are some of the processes we have to deal with, and we need to move more expeditiously through them. The other thing I would say is, quite frankly, we may rely too much on work plans to provide us resources, and in this era, we don't even know right now what 2024 looks like. We have no work plan. We have no sense of whether there will be an appropriations bill, whether there will be a continuing resolution. This impacts our ability to move forward. And then, as General Spellman noted, in our budget cycle, we're always going to be 18 months to 24 months behind any new authorizations appropriations. Probably went on a little too long, but thanks for the opportunity.
No, thanks for going a little too long. All right, Senator Capito.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to go right to the two provisions that I mentioned in my opening statement. Secretary Connor, WRDA 2022 contained a provision that requires the Corps to track and provide an annual report to Congress on the timelines for completing environmental reviews. Seems to me you'd have that information anyway, but you come back now estimating that a considerable amount of funding is going to be needed to implement this provision. My understanding is that Corps districts and divisions already utilize software that allows them to track and upward report key activities. What is the status of that? And can I have your commitment that your staff will work with mine to identify a path forward so we can effectively implement this provision?
You absolutely have my commitment to work through if there is a quicker way that we can get the relevant information up and available for the public. Even if we move forward through databases, I'm happy to do that and look for alternative means. We want to be transparent. We want to get that information out. So the status of implementation, if I don't know if the chief has better information on this particular status.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Ma'am, this is Section 8134 about NEPA reporting, and I think there's a disconnect between our teams on what the requirements are. And I think that just having a session on this, unfortunately, it's taken this long to get this conversation. We believe we're being asked to report on 150 or so feasibility studies and how they are working their way through 40 different environmental laws and regulations, and then have a public-facing website for that. If it's something less, that's a conversation we should have so that we can get moving.
So are you suggesting a meeting between our teams and your teams? Is that the teams we're talking about?
Yes, ma'am, our staff, so we better understand the intent of that particular.
Well, I mean, this has been, 2 years in the making here, so we probably should have had those called to our attention. Isn't this what you're asking for, another $3 million to implement this particular provision, correct?
So, ma'am, if that's the requirement to report on compliance with 40 environmental laws and regulations for those 150 studies and make it public-facing, yes, we would need resources.
Okay, so let me just ask a simple question. I'm sure you have in your work plans, where they're districts or whatever, they have steps and implementation steps. Certainly, they have some sort of flow chart that shows where they are. Is it the public-facing part of it that's causing the delay?
I believe combining all that across 42 districts into one central database would be the requirement, as we understand it.
Okay. Let's go to the economically disadvantaged communities and the CAP. You mentioned the CAP projects that are delayed. And so these are projects that need feasibility studies, federal interest determinations. I know that you have to use the rulemaking. So you kept referring to they, we, this on the guidance thing. If somebody's actually watching this and trying to figure out who is telling him what to do, who is that?
I'm going to be very judicious here. So just let's take 165. Fortunately, we were able to move forward without going through a notice and comment. We did go through an environmental assessment. We did make notice of funding availability, and we took in applications from the public, and now we're in the last throes of evaluating that and moving forward. So there, once again, we are more in control. With respect to 118, the pilot projects for economically disadvantaged communities, first we had to go through the guidance process to define economically disadvantaged communities. That took like a year and a half.
Right.
And then when we go through the process, when we think it might be significant, or fall into that, we make our case as to why it is or why we think it's not.
Well, who are you making your case to?
That's initially to the Department of Defense, that we've got to
Okay.
get cleared, our proposed guidance cleared through DOD, then it goes to OIRA
Okay.
within the White House. So there's 2 steps in that process, which complicates things from a time perspective and complicates things from people having different views than I do with respect to the significance of any particular action. So those are the specific steps.
So anybody listening says that's bureaucracy with a capital B. And so let me ask you, on the 165 projects, when do you think those will come out? You said that shortly? What's shortly? Summer?
Yeah, I'm proposed to make those decisions here in the next couple of weeks. Then got to get that cleared through the administration process. So I'm hoping, given the the urgency, the need, and the fact that this is pretty straightforward stuff, that we can move out in end of March, end of April timeframe.
Okay, okay. The Fiscal Responsibility Act contained various amendments to NEPA intended to improve the environmental process for all types of projects, including water resource projects. In prior orders, Congress has provided the Corps with specific authorities to improve this process. Can you describe what actions the Corps has taken to ensure that the agency is compliant with these new statutory requirements? And have you identified any additions? I don't know who would be best to answer this question. General?
Yes, ma'am. So we certainly have taken advantage of the $160 million in bill funding for our regulatory teams to help us with much of this environmental work. No one wants to get through NEPA within 2 years more than the Army Corps of Engineers. Unfortunately, this is very litigious on a number of projects. We're not given the easy ones, and we're asked for a lot of decimal points in our analysis. Social cost of carbon, greenhouse gas emissions, multiple options in each one of these, and that level of effort simply takes time.
Is the social cost of carbon part, a statutory part of NEPA?
So ma'am, we could pick a pipeline, and a typical analysis will be, okay, what's the social cost of carbon and greenhouse gas emissions for moving that product through a pipe? And now we'll be asked to do the same to compare that for the trucks that would haul those fossil fuels to market.
Well, I guess what I'm asking, is that a statutory part that it has to, or is that just what the administration's telling you to do?
It's part of the NEPA regulations now
Okay.
to do that.
The CEQ came back with, right?
Right.
Which just elongates the projects, makes them more expensive, and in some ways, they're not getting done.
I understand your point, and it has complicated us to figure out what life cycle we're looking at with respect to greenhouse gases. We're working through that right now, but once we get that, then I think the social cost of carbon aspect of it is actually pretty straightforward to move forward. And as General Spellman, we're fully committed to working through NEPA, to using EAs as much as we can as opposed to full EISs. The reality is when we get into certain projects, and Senator Kramer is very familiar with one and would like me to move much quicker, we get 300,000 comments, 30,000 substantive comments. These are incredibly complicated. I'm talking about Dakota Access. And we have to work through that to ensure that hopefully it's a longer process, and that's provided for with limited exceptions, even with the Debt Limitation Act, but we've got to do it to make sure we can survive any litigation so we can make our decisions stick.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Capito. Senator Kramer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Capito, and I'm tempted to go right into DAPL, but since this is a word of hearing, we'll start there, and maybe we'll get to DAPL. First of all, thank you to both of you. I don't know that we say it often enough. You're both generous with your time and your talent, and you're always available to us collectively, and more impressively, Mr. Chairman, to each of us individually, and it's really, we're just grateful for that. I'm grateful for that. So thank you for that. So I might as well get to everybody's favorite topic in the world, General, and that would be the Snake Creek embankment, of course. And you and I haven't talked for so long. I feel like this is the first time I'm getting caught up. So as you know, from what I'm hearing out of Omaha, the sort of dealing with the approach to fixing Snake Creek, I'm getting a little concerned. They're committed to to removing the 43-foot difference at this time. But what about the structural? What can you tell me about actually fixing the structural problems? Because that's got me a little nervous.
Yes, sir. So you're correct. The water control manual has been updated, and the 43-foot head differential has been removed. And just for everyone, this is an embankment that was designed to hold 54 feet of water, and it holds less than that, 43. So we're about 11 feet off. So, sir, we're wrapping up the dam safety modification study. I want to take this out of the dam safety realm and put it into drought resiliency. So I've directed the Omaha District to come back with 2 structural solutions, seepage berms and an embankment. If we receive a 24 appropriation, we'll take $500K of dam safety wedge funds, and we'll do 30% designs on both of those structural solutions to restore the full capability of that embankment, and we'll bring those to the administration and to Congress for their consideration.
Thank you very much for the update. And just for people's knowledge, what this does is it allows the moving of Missouri River water to over 50% of North Dakota's population, which is we always say we don't have a water problem in North Dakota, we have a water distribution problem. But anyway, this is an important part of that infrastructure. So thank you for that update. Assistant Secretary Connor, in WRDA 2022, we included some language establishing this Western Water Cooperative Committee. It allows the western states like North Dakota sort of this opportunity to bring issues directly to the core. I'm just wondering what the status of establishing that is, because I've been hearing from some of the states, including mine, that there's been a lot of activity yet. Has it been established, or what? Do you know what the status is of establishing the committee?
Excuse me, Senator. The process for establishing that committee is to go through, get a Federal Advisory Committee charter through the Department of Defense. I believe that's been completed on this one, to designate a federal officer, provide the correct training. We've done that. So we've teed up the actions necessary to move forward with the committee, and then we need appropriations or budgeted resources, one or the other, to move forward with the activity, because this one in particular is going to be fairly expensive. We're paying for, the travel, the logistics of getting folks together with respect to that. And once again, we're going to lag on any budget resources with respect to post-WRDA authorization before, or we can use work plan, neither one which we've had the opportunity to move forward with. So we're teed up, ready to go, but we do need the resources to implement.
I hesitate to start this conversation openly, and maybe you and I have talked about this before, but is there no way for states to absorb some of that cost, since they're the ones asking for this access? And I mean, near as I can tell, most states in the West have a better financial standing than the federal government does. I mean, I know this is, I'm probably blowing everybody's minds here with something like this, but isn't there a way to do that, to share some of that cost burden with the states?
There probably is. When we have some resources available to start this activity up, it likely won't be sufficient to call everything that's been authorized with respect to those actions. So we can go to the states at that point in time and say, we need some help here so that we can do the core part of the core, C-O-R-E, part of those activities, and you've got to help with the rest of it. So I think, that happens on every project that we do, as well as probably with respect to standing up a committee.
Since you brought up DAPL, and I was going to anyway,
Okay.
just so you know, as long as I have time. As you know, we're in week 3 of the federal tort claim trial in North Dakota, trying to get some money back get some money from the federal government to pay for the damages and the the policing of the protests, the violent protests that the Corps facilitated on Corps land. And so it's sort of top of the mind right now in North Dakota. So it brings me to the EIS issue, because this is a pipeline that's been safely moving hundreds of thousands of barrels of oil a day to market for several years now, and we still don't have the EIS. It's been delayed multiple times. You spoke a little bit ago about what I would call an enduring, a solution there, something that's durable. What's the status of the final EIS?
So we issued the draft EIS last fall. I think we opened up with a 45-day comment period, extended it once. That's my reference to receiving 300,000 comments, 200,000 comments, 30,000 of which are, unique and substantive that we've got to refer to. We are still on track for moving forward as quickly as we can to be in a position to issue a final EIS this fall with a record of decision somewhere in the 30 to 60-day time frame after that. So we're proceeding, and I understand the frustration with how long it's taken. It's an example, though, of when we try and take shortcuts and we do an environmental assessment as opposed to an EIS, and then we get litigation and we get setbacks in the overall long-term structure. So that's why we're trying to think this through, do it right, respond, do correct tribal consultation, integrate their concerns and our responses into the process, and get this product done so that it can stand the test of time.
My wife often says haste makes waste to me, for what it's worth. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thanks for those words of wisdom from your wife. Our next colleague is going to be recognized as Senator Padilla, and after that, Senator Wicker, and then we'll see who else shows up. Thank you. Senator Padilla, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to begin by associating myself with Senator Kramer's remarks that, yes, our wives are full of wisdom. Mr. Chairman, in the last 5 years, more than 100 million gallons of toxic sewage, garbage, and other pollution have flowed over the United States-Mexico border, resulting in a public health and environmental crisis for Southern California coastal communities. This isn't a new problem, unfortunately. For decades, the underserved communities along San Diego's southern border, along with military personnel, border patrol agents, and the local environment and economy, have all suffered impacts of waterborne and now increasingly airborne impacts of transboundary sewage flows. I know our witnesses are very well aware of the situation. Now, rehabilitating and expanding the International Wastewater Treatment Plant in San Diego is critical, again, for multiple reasons. I'm talking not just public health, but national security, as well as environmental protection. And beyond more federal funding, it's clear that federal agencies need to act as one in order to comprehensively address this dire situation as soon as possible. Now, Secretary Connor, I applaud the administration's efforts to reprioritize projects in historically underserved and overlooked communities. And General Spellmon, the Corps has been a great partner to the International Boundary and Water Commission in contracting and the procurement process for this project. And I want to share with my colleagues that I'm working with our House colleagues also to include new authorization in WRDA 2024 to leverage the Corps' environmental infrastructure and ecosystem expertise to mitigate pollution in the disadvantaged communities in the Tijuana River watershed. Question for both Secretary Connor and General Spellmon. What efforts have you made to date to leverage the engineering and contracting expertise to help the Commission make these critical infrastructure upgrades as soon as possible?
Senator Padilla, I appreciate the question and the theme of it, which is federal agencies need to act as one, because when there's issues, it's an all-hands-on-deck type of situation, and we recognize that. Other than, I'm aware of our work with the International Boundary and Water Commission on the Rio Grande system and the work we do to support their dam safety efforts in other areas. I am not familiar with the specifics of what we may have done in the Tijuana River situation, other than the fact that we have done similar work, and I know in Mississippi and other places, to evaluating drinking water systems, wastewater infrastructure needs, so engineering consulting services that the Corps can do. I would think we would be able to find a way to do that there. But General Spellman?
Senator, I'll just add, I do have a general understanding of this issue, and our South Pacific Division had early dialogue with the Boundary Water Commission. They wanted some advice on technical requirements for the solution as well as an acquisition approach. We shared all of that with them. The Boundary Commission self-performed on this contract, letting that in December of 23. I don't know the final scope of that work, but so that's where my knowledge ends, and we stand by to provide any additional technical support that they may require.
Okay. Well, then consider this question, this hearing, as my putting it now on your radar and on your plate. I know spoken with Secretary Connor about the urgency of the situation. I can see how it may look from the point of view of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, or frankly across the country, both sides of the aisle. Not too much sympathy for coastal communities around San Diego, but we're talking about disadvantaged communities in so many ways along the border. So we have this tricky jurisdictional concern. We do have a partner with the government of Mexico putting forward their expertise and resources for what's to be done on their side of the border. But when the impacts is not just more than a year and a half running of beach closures because of waste in the water. It's not just health impacts for surfers and tourists. We're talking Border Patrol personnel, military personnel that's in training that become significantly ill because of the conditions of the water, and it's something that we can absolutely do something about. It is within our jurisdiction. It is within resources. There has been additional funding requested by the president in the supplemental package that morphed into what the Senate passed last week. So we know it has a priority of the White House, and I'm just pleading with you all to work together, work with me, and work with others to address this situation as quickly as possible. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Padilla. Senator Wecker and Senator Bozeman, you're on the on-deck circle.
Thank you very much. Secretary Connor, thank you so much for visiting with me numerous times about a number of issues, including the Mississippi River and tributaries system, specifically the dam at Arcabutla Reservoir that is threatened and how that might also affect Grenada, Enid, and Sardis reservoirs, the Pearl River flooding problem, the Mississippi Sound water intrusion along the Gulf Coast, and the Tennessee-Tombigbee waterway. I hardly know where to begin, but let's talk about the Mississippi Sound. As you know, the opening of the Bonnie Carey spillway along the Mississippi River had extremely detrimental impacts on our marine ecosystem. It injected fresh water from the Mississippi River into the salt water of the Gulf Coast, devastating our shrimp and oyster industry. The Mississippi delegation sent a letter to Colonel Klein of the Vicksburg District requesting that members of the Mississippi Sound Coalition be included as stakeholders, the Mississippi Sound Coalition, and that the Mobile District be considered an equal participant. We have not received a response to that letter from the Mississippi Congressional delegation. So help us on that if you possibly can. Let's get that rectified quickly. The Mississippi Sound Coalition includes mayors, elected county supervisors, business leaders, and commercial fishers from the Mississippi Gulf Coast community. My colleague, Congressman Ezell, from the 4th District of Mississippi, during a House T&I hearing last year, asked you if you would ensure that these community leaders and business owners are included in conversations about the study, and you answered in the affirmative. Somehow, the Mississippi Sound Coalition did not even receive notice about the most recent stakeholder meeting in January. Will you commit to formally recognizing the Mississippi Sound Coalition, and will you commit to allowing the Mobile District to serve as an equal participant and support for the study?
Senator, I'm going to follow up on the letter. I'm going to follow up on the issues. I mean, the lower there is no reason why we can't include the Mississippi Sound folks in the Lower Mississippi River Comprehensive Study. The whole point is to rethink and to look at the system we have right now, the new challenges, the changes in operations, such as the more frequent use of the Montecarry spillway, and think what else we need to be doing to protect all the interests. And so we want all the interested parties and affected communities to be part of that discussion.
Do you have any idea why that fell through and why the coalition was not notified?
I do not, sir, and we can follow up.
Okay, well, and I would simply add to this question the fact that a federal judge has ruled in a very important case that this the opening of this spillway was done contrary to law. So I wanted to mention that. Let's talk about the Tennessee Tombigbee waterway, and this is another instance where direction was given. This is in the word of 2020. Directed the Corps to expedite the completion of a feasibility study to deepen the Tennessee Tombigbee waterway from 9 to 12 feet. Congress provided $3 million in congressionally directed spending to do this. We've now been told that that as a matter of fact, they're going to concentrate first on the Black Warrior Tombigbee waterway deepening, and that will take precedence over the study to deepen the Tenn-Tom. Tenn-Tom Authority was informed that a waiver from USACE headquarters was needed to continue the study. Word of 2020 says the Secretary shall expedite the completion of a feasibility study for the Tenn-Tom. So when do you expect the Corps to complete this expedited study to deepen the Tenn-Tom?
Spellmon.
All right.
Sir, I'll jump in. First, I want to just make sure, we had our first public meeting on the lower Mississippi in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi yesterday, and heard from the coalition loud and clear. So I was glad that they were there and got a lot of great feedback from them. Sir, this has
Mississippi Sound.
Mississippi Sound, yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, on the study, this hasn't gotten to Mr. Connor yet. It's on my desk. We are going to take to him next week a proposal to do both proposals. So we're going to update him. We are going to look at both of these waterways and the deepening to 12 feet. I need some additional time and resources, and I'm going to outline that to Mr. Connor next week.
Will you be looking at them simultaneously?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, on the Tenn-Tom, it's pretty much shut down below Demopolis and Coffeyville in Alabama now because the lock broke. This is a critical problem, and what it does is it requires shippers above these two locks and dams to ship all the way up to Paducah, go down the Ohio, and then the Mississippi. So what is our plan to expedite this and keep the Tim-Tom from being closed for some significant period of time?
Yes, sir. I just want to credit the teams in the field. They saved those upper pools, and within 4 days, we have a 40-foot by 10-foot gap in the upper basin sill on this project. We'll pour concrete beginning next month. That work will wrap up in May, and then we'll get the system reopened.
So the system will be able to reopen in May?
In May. We'll have the sill repaired by May. Yes, sir.
All right, well, thank you, and there may be some more questions for the record, but I do appreciate it. And again, we couldn't do without you, but we just have so many problems that are grave and actually affecting the livelihood of people around in our area. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Senator Bozeman, thanks for joining us. Thanks for your patience, and you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much, and thank you all for being here. We appreciate the great work that you do and in this such an important area. Last year in front of this committee, I mentioned the Air Force selecting Ebbing Air Force Base in Fort Smith to serve as the home of the F-35 training mission, and that's certainly important to our allies, but it's also so important to our own national security. As you know, the Corps Little Rock District is responsible for new construction for this mission and will be tasked to meet tight turnarounds. And again, the Colonel is doing a great job. I guess I just wanted to visit a little bit. Can you provide us any updates regarding the execution of the project? Is everything going well with your relationship with the Air Force? And
Yes, sir, that part's going fine. The CR is having an impact. So certainly I want to acknowledge the importance of this program. To date, we are responsible for 6 projects in this, what will be eventually a $485 million program. From the Air Force, we received $10 million of that $485 to begin design. We're ready for the next installment of about $3 million to wrap up PED and get going on those first contracts.
very good. Well, thank you very much. General Spellmon, Assistant Secretary Connor, as you know, we are in a situation where Phase 2 of Three Rivers on the MCARNs needs to be completed and thereby avoid any further construction delays and cost increases. The MCARNs is a vital component of the economies of Arkansas, Oklahoma, as well as Kansas, in fact, the nation. Losing navigation on the entire MCARNs would cost over 6,000 jobs and cause national GDP decline by $723 million. A critical failure on the system could result in it being shut down for months, and even a temporary shutdown could put future use of the system at risk. It's my understanding that there is a unanimous support from industry and the delegation regarding the movement of 12-foot deepening project funds transferred to complete Phase 2 of Three Rivers. If this is the case, can you tell us about the reallocation, why it hadn't occurred, or your concerns about that?
Senator, we have the opportunity to finish that project, and we want to do that and ensure we don't have any additional cost increases. So, as of today, we have reallocated that money, made the necessary, informing Congress of the reallocation of $83 million from the MCARN's 12-foot deepening project that can't be used anytime soon over to the project that will allow us to initiate the contracting action to be done by the end of this year to make sure, I think it's $113 million left to fully complete that project. We will find the additional resources to do that, but that action is effective as of today.
Good. Thank you very much.
And Senator, I would just add, we have all the funding that we need this year to continue on with NEPA. We have a lot of NEPA work to do, and then also preliminary engineering and design for this deepening. We have the funds we need right now to keep moving forward.
No, we appreciate it. You all have been so helpful in that regard. So, again, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Material, labor, supply chain costs are impacting everyone, not just entities involved with construction. However, what we see too often with the Corps is full funding being assigned to a project, and then we find out that we are still tens or hundreds of millions of dollars short of completion. General Spellmon, Assistant Secretary Connor, how can we collectively do a better job at forecasting future costs so we execute more projects on time and budget? I'm familiar. I'm more than familiar in the sense that I have the military construction part of the appropriations with Senator Murray, and we run into these problems all the time. Do you have any suggestions for us?
Yes, sir. First, we are changing the way we report cost estimates both to the Secretary and to Congress. And you'll see that in this next round of chiefs reports that come before you for WRDA 24. In the past, we have done a design through the midpoint of construction, and we come back and tell Congress and Secretary Connor with 3 decimal points what we think it's going to cost. We're going to continue to do that. The law requires it, but we're also going to give you a range of the potential costs and the assumptions that go into our cost estimates. So we're doing a lot internally to the Corps to get after this. We are not the only we're not the only agency, construction agency dealing with this, but you have our commitment to continue to work.
Can I just add real quickly? I think, one option, the Corps, as General Spellmon mentioned, is doing a lot of actions to improve the cost estimating process. One of the things that we can do is improve design maturity, and that means, applying more resources early on to do some of the in-depth work and design that we need so we can go with, in the 3x3x3 process, is it a 5x3x3 where we can do more work early on, get to 20-25% design maturity as opposed to 15%. That'll help solidify cost estimates. So we've been having good discussions with committee staff about that. I think that's an important.
Good. Well, let us know how we can help. I think that's something the entire committee agrees with, how we can be more effective. So thank you.
Senator Bozeman, thanks. Senator Workley, thanks for your patience, and you're recognized now. And in the on-deck circle is Senator Mon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And Secretary Connor and General Spellman, it's great to see you both. Before I ask questions, I want to just commend the work of the Corps in the Portland District Office in advancing the Portland Metro levee system. It's a 27-mile levee system along the Columbia River. General Spellman, you were the commanding general at Northwestern Division when the project got underway, and it would be great to see the project come full circle by getting into the construction phase, and I look forward to working with you to see that happen. Thank you. The Coal Rivers Hatchery, named for an individual, not for a river, the Coal Rivers Hatchery is on the Rogue River, and it plays an absolutely critical role. Colonel Michael Helton, now retired, went down with me, and when we came to the recognition of how many different native fish populations in different rivers that it provided, and also rainbow trout for various lakes, and the hatcheries in great trouble because of the lack of clean water and disease that could shut down the hatchery, and just kind of 30 years of wear and tear. So restoring that hatchery to its full functionality is incredibly important, and the Army Corps, to do so, needs to identify significant capability for this project. Do you commit to working with the Portland District and my staff and with me in identifying as much capability as possible for restoring the Coal Rivers Hatchery?
Yes, sir.
General, thank you very much. I want to turn to tribal housing on the Columbia River. When the dams were built on the Columbia River, the town for Caucasians that was inundated was rebuilt, but the villages, the native villages, were never rebuilt. And so we've been working intensely to try to create, right that wrong from now 3/4 of a century ago. And the Army Corps released last month the implementation plan for the village development plans for the tribes. And what timeline do you expect to reach the implementation phase of the plan and begin construction on housing?
Yes, sir. I would just start off my response by saying we are in a much better place than we were 5-6 years ago when we stepped off on this effort, where we were trying to combine the tribes into one consolidated village. The direction we're going now are separate sites for each of the tribes. We're in the process now of identifying the needs and the potential locations, which bank, what site, so that we can get on with the village development plan. So we're about 6 months into the real estate culling down what the options are, and then we'll be able to get into more meaningful discussions on the specifics of each one of those villages. So we have the resources we need, and we are in a much better place with the impacted tribes than we've ever been in the past.
Well, I really appreciate that observation, and all the easy-to-develop land has been developed along both sides of the north bank and the south bank of the river, which means it will never be easy to find these sites. They'll be expensive, they'll be difficult to provide infrastructure, but it's so important that we address this situation, that a legacy wrong that we need to right. And by the way, the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs Reservation of Oregon and the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation have expressed optimism and appreciation for the level of engagement they've had with the Army Corps at this point. So you're all really doing a great job, and I'm very much impressed by what you've done, and I understand you're planning to continue regular engagement with the tribes.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Yes, thank you. In particular, the tribes have noted the Corps is further along on the displacement assessments for the Bonneville and Dalles Dam pools. Will you also work to expedite the displacement assessments for the John Day and McNary pools?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Capito, I'm struck by the range of issues that have been brought up here, and I'm glad you guys have done your homework, and more questions to follow. Let's see, next, Senator Mullen, in the on-deck circle, Senator Fetterman, my neighbor in Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Senator Bozeman took most of my questions talking about the MCARNs because it's both vitally important to our states. And I just want to throw some fun facts out there because I get the MCARNs sometimes gets overlooked because it's not a huge waterway. It's not as big as Ohio, Mississippi, and people just honestly forget about it. And when we tell people that we have a inland water port in Oklahoma, people are like, what? And then, but when you really start talking about the facts, I mean, here you have a navigational channel that's 445 miles long. That's the largest and farthest inland water port in the United States. During the winter months, it contributes to over 50% of all ag products moving in and out of the western states, Midwest. During the summer months, it operates over 50% of all the ag products leaving Kansas, Oklahoma, and 40% in Nebraska. Just in Oklahoma alone, it employs 11,000 people just on the navigational channel. It's $1.6 billion of economic impact yearly. And I say all this because we have 18 locks on that port. You heard Senator Bozeman talk about the depth that we need to increase from 9 foot to 12 foot, which would be a 40% increase. Right now, we have so much barge traffic, we can't increase anymore. All the products that I just named would actually increase if we just went from 9 foot to 12 foot, a 40% increase, and products being brought up and down. But at the same time, when I first got into office, we had a $60 million backlog of critical backlog needs. Today, sir, we're over $600 million of critical backlog needs. And let me explain to what critical backlog means. It means it's got a 50-50 chance of failing anytime it can shut down. So we can lose this whole navigational channel, but priorities keep switching, and we keep getting farther and farther and farther behind. Every year, we're not catching up, we're getting behind. And I just asked the question, what are we doing about the critical backlog need?
Yeah, sir, great question, and those numbers are correct. Congress is helping us immensely. Of that $600 million backlog, we received $463 million in 22 and 23 to get after longstanding O&M, and we're in the president's budget for another 112. And so I'll just throw some additional numbers at you.
That's across all your navigational channels?
No, sir.
That's just for MCARNs?
That's for MCARNs. But the numbers are, it's the 18 lock and dams, but on those projects there, you have 225 miter gates that all need work, Tainer gates, 36 miter gates, and we're working through 12, what we call 110-foot stop log conversions. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of effort. We appreciate the investment, working hard through the qualified labor to get these projects in the ground.
So do you know how far behind we are on that then? I mean, like we have a lot of the money, how long is it going to take you to get caught up?
Yeah, sir, I would like to get with both districts, and I can come back to you with an accurate response.
Okay. And I appreciate I know we all have our own issues here, and I do appreciate, I will say what the chairman said, your depth of knowledge is quite remarkable. And the fact that you came that prepared really excites me. And so anything that I can do to be helpful. Have you been to the Incarns?
Several times, yes, sir.
Okay. Next time you go, make sure that I get the opportunity to visit with you, because I'd love to take a ride down that navigational channel and through maybe one of the locks. It's remarkable what they're doing with an old system and how they're keeping it going. The guys that work on those locks are absolutely impressive.
Very innovative, yes, sir.
Very much. Thank you. I yield back.
All right, thank you. Next is Senator Fetterman. Senator Fetterman, welcome. Good to see you. And in the on-deck circle is Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And hello, welcome. There's no reason why you would know this, but I live in Western Pennsylvania, and one of the great things that your organization has done, and that's the Braddock Locks and Dam. Perhaps you might be familiar with that, but the work that the Army Corps has done on the Mon and the Ohio rivers have really put things in motion for another 100 years of commerce in Western PA. And I take every opportunity to praise your organization's work. And I'm grateful, so thank you. And now I'm excited to be working with Chair Carper and Ranking Member Capito to ensure that the WRDA bill includes priorities that are critical to Pennsylvania's infrastructure. The first priority I want to ask you today is about acid mine drainage. People may not know the term, but Pennsylvania sees that impact when their rivers might turn bright orange in a very shocking kinds of shade, and it often will be fish kills. One watershed in PA, the Tioga River watershed, has water acidic as vinegar. They will be needed the kind of investment of more than $60 million to clean the drainage and to bring back life to that ecosystem. This isn't just in Pennsylvania's problem. There are other states as well that have these kinds of challenges. So, sir, if you had a pre-dedicated program for acid mine drainage, how could the Corps assist communities that need technical and financial help with this problem?
Yes, sir, I'll start. First of all, I want to acknowledge the water quality issues. Our teams are very familiar with that. In the past, we've been using public assistance to states or Section 206 in the CAP program. You run into some funding limits with each one of those, sir, so you are correct. I think a specific authority to actually get after this challenge would greatly enable the Corps to get after the scope of everything you've just described.
So would you peg that amount, $60 million? Does that seem... Is that too much, too low, kind of Goldilocks?
Sir, I don't know the value. I know the scope of the problem. I just can't monetize it.
Okay, all right, thank you. I'm also working to ensure the commercial future of the Allegheny River. If we are going to make things happen in West Pennsylvania, we need the Allegheny River to be open for business. Right now, there's a risk for operational hours will be reduced. Along with my colleague and friend Senator Casey, I proposed language to help us find a path forward for Allegheny County to keep lockage levels and service steady until we do. So, Lieutenant General Spellmon, you affirmed to my office that you would evaluate the economic impacts before considering a decrease on these service levels. Would that evaluation include the long-term harm to current commerce in the region if the lock hours were threatened or reduced?
Yes, sir. You're correct. This is in regard to the 8 locks and dams that we have on the Allegheny River. The economic analysis that I mentioned in the previous hearing, that's based on a 3-year average of both commercial and recreation lockages that we do at each of those 8 facilities. So in other words, we let the commerce dictate the level of service that we have at each one of those locks, not vice versa. So today, Lock and Dam 2 and the C.W. Bill Young Lock and Dam, they're the busiest, and we have 2 10-hour shifts per day passing that traffic. Lock and Dam 4 and 5, a little bit less traffic, so they have 1 10-hour shift. And then Locks 6 through 9, those upper 4, much less traffic, and so we operate those by commercial traffic by appointment only. So we will increase that level of service. It's all based on the traffic that we're seeing.
So finally, is it fair to say that you're willing to commit to work with my office to increase utilization and maintain of service?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. And I see the remaining, back to the chair.
Thanks, Senator Fetterman. Senator Sullivan, I said that you were in the on-deck circle, but we got two colleagues who got here earlier today and had to leave. So I have, under the rules, I need to recognize them first. So just bear with us, please. Senator Kelly, you're recognized next.
Mr. Chairman, I did not check in.
Excuse me, Senator Ricketts, you're recognized next. Pardon me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Carper, and thank you, Ranking Member Capito, for holding today's hearing. And I want to thank Lieutenant General Spellmon and Mr. Connor for joining us here as well. I'm grateful for the improving partnership between my state and the Corps, and hopeful the projects that we can complete moving forward to be able to serve Nebraskans. This March marks the 5 years since the blizzard and flooding that was the most widespread natural disaster in our state's history. As governor at the time, I saw firsthand how this once-in-a-500-year flood claimed lives and caused billions of damage in dollars in damages across my state. And that's why, for me, the #1 priority with the Army Corps is flood prevention. And last year, 10 months ago, you were here and we were discussing the permitting timelines and the outliers. I want to make sure that Nebraskans impacted by mistakes in the past get answers and we don't make the same mistakes again. And I know the permitting delay, which led to the flooding at Offutt Air Force Base, involved many circumstances, and I appreciate your office getting back to us with some of the information around that, and it certainly demonstrated that there was plenty of opportunity all around to be able to improve that. And I think the Army Corps itself admitted that this was an outlier project. And when we spoke last, you pointed to the fact that Corps districts are given discretion to expedite reviews where appropriate. General Spellman, what steps have you taken to prioritize and ensure the completion of some of these outlier projects? The one I just referenced with Offutt Air Force Base took 6 years to get the permit. What steps have you taken to be able to address some of those outlier projects?
Yeah, sir, I think I can come back to that outlier. I don't believe that one was an outlier. I would disagree with that characterization of it. We are, I mentioned earlier in the hearing that we are taking advantage of funding that you and Congress have given us, particularly in the bipartisan infrastructure law. We have hired an additional 160 regulators for our districts, and we're on our way to 200. So we've got new tools in place, a regulatory reviewer system that allows our regulators to make more efficient decisions in the field when they're out there with their partners, walking the ground on these respective projects. And as I said, we've done 15,000 Section 404 and Section 10 permits to date this fiscal year. And we're up to about 78% on time. That's a slight increase from last year, but we'll take that, and we're going to continue to push on this very important program.
So I'm curious. You said you disagree with the notion that it was an outlier project. My recollection is you've said that most of your permits get done in like 18 months. Isn't that right?
No, sir. So this was a Section 408 request, and we typically turn those around within 90 days. The project you mentioned, I'm sorry, we do tens of thousands of these each year, so I don't have them all committed to memory. This one started in 2010. The applicant brought in an engineering firm. We didn't actually have an application until 2013. In the Omaha district. We received the application. It had a number of technical shortcomings. We received it in May. We gave it back to the applicant in August. Senator, we didn't hear from that applicant again for 2 years. And then we got it back. We were able to get it to
so that's
final.
kind of my point, is that it's an outlier because it's one that took longer than your normal process. Is that not accurate?
An outlier because 5 years of the 6 years you described were with the applicant, not with the Corps.
Right. But, okay, so isn't that an opportunity to be able to get back to the applicant and say, hey, what's taking so long? Can we close this out? That's why I say this took an extraordinary long time. And like I said, there's opportunity on everybody to be able to improve. I think one of the areas the Army Corps could improve is by saying, hey, 2 years is a long time. Are you guys going to respond back to this or not? Can we close this case?
No, I think, no, sir, you've got it wrong. We were waiting on the applicant to get back with us on the technical questions.
Getting back to the applicant and saying, why haven't you responded back to us? You asked for this permit. Can we shut it down or not?
We did. We got it in May. We turned it around in August. So they did hear back from us. And then they went dry for 2 years.
That's my point. When you have somebody who's in your process flagging that they haven't responded back for 2 years and maybe circling
Sure, we
back.
could,
with an
we could
opportunity
potentially
for
look at that,
improvement.
Senator.
I mean,
Absolutely.
That would be one, I mean, either, or shutting down the process and saying, hey, we're actually not going forward, and then you can actually take it off of your books. That would help you out as well, right?
Absolutely.
All right, well, let me shift gears on you just a moment. Following the issue of the final WOTUS rule, did your headquarters give an internal guidance to core districts in September of 2023 on implementing the rule, which includes issues on assessing whether certain features like arid west ranges are relatively permanent?
Sir, there's been a series of guidance that has gone out to the field following the 8 September 23 rule from Sackett.
So is this one where you instructed them not to make that guidance public?
I'm not familiar with not making things public, sir. We're working hard to be open and transparent in
Senator,
everything we do.
Yeah.
It's more out of my office.
Okay, please, yeah.
if
Can
I
you
may.
enlighten me on this one?
Yeah, absolutely. The guidance we provided in September, post-Sackett decision, was merely to represent how we were going to work through processes of making jurisdictional determinations with our counterparts at EPA. So it's an elevation memo to describe the process because we knew there would be questions coming up. We haven't issued any guidance specifically on more detailed interpretation than what we did in the conforming rule that got published on September 8th.
So help me understand this. So you issued this as internal guidance, is that accurate?
Internal guidance, but it's out there, it's available for anybody to see. It's published
So
on our
you have
websites.
published this?
Pardon me?
So it is public, you have published it?
That's correct.
And so applicants would have access to this guidance from September 2023 with regard to their application?
It's procedural guidance, but happy to share it with anybody, and I believe it's on the websites.
Great. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Senator Capito has to leave us. She's asked to ask another question.
Just
Go
one-
right ahead, please.
One question, apologies to those I'm jumping in front of. General Spellman, you mentioned the challenges posed by the social cost of carbon to project development. Has the interagency working group consulted you in the development of those figures? Have you had any input with their conversations with them about this?
Ma'am, I could follow up specifically at what level in the field where we're doing many of these pipeline EISs, to
Right.
what level we're engaging with that group.
Well,
I have
we've
not
been
had
trying.
any personal interaction.
Okay, we've been trying to find out how these costs are calculated and what the cost is. So while you're looking at that, could you find out what figures you are using? Are they the same ones that the EPA is using in these regulations? And have you committed to the interagency working group that the social cost of carbon is hindering your ability to meet your statutory guidelines under the NEPA process that we put into effect 2
Yeah,
years
I think I understand the question, ma'am. All of our calculations are in the draft EISs and all of the regulatory products that we produce when we go through the NEPA process.
you
It's
have
all
a
there for the
cost-
public to see.
Okay, so you have a cost assigned there, but do you know how, what dollar figure they're using to social cost of carbon? There is a dollar figure associated with this, right?
There is a dollar figure per...
What is that? Do you know?
I don't have that. We're happy to respond about our interactions with the interagency group as well as the
Okay.
specifics.
Okay, and then last thing for questions for the record, I want to submit a question on the hold and save clause. Thank you very much.
Without objection. Good. All right. Senator Stabenow was here at the beginning of the hearing, and she's come back, and I'm going to let her go ahead of you, Senator Sullivan. She'll bear with us, but you'll get to go ahead as Senator Kelly. There you go. It's kind of interesting. We got a Marine over here, just retired as a full colonel, great career, and we've got a Navy captain over there, and one here, the Army out here. We just remember missing any Air Force out there. All four services represented. Senator Stabenow, you're recognized.
Well,
Thanks
thank
for coming back.
As we all do, my attempt to be at two hearings at the same time this morning, so checking into both, and glad to be back. Appreciate so much, and appreciate our witnesses today. Good morning. It's good to see you, and not surprising the issues I want to talk about. So I appreciate so much partnering with you. Let me start with the big ongoing issue, Mr. Connor and Lieutenant General Spellmon, that we've been working on together, which is the SULACs. And as you know, in the last WRDA, we secured the authorization necessary to complete the SULACs project. And let me just say to my colleagues, this is a major infrastructure project that's key to moving raw materials, agricultural products, finished goods through the St. Lawrence Seaway into the Great Lakes and then throughout our country. So it's a critical infrastructure project. And we know from the Department of Homeland Security economic impact statement that a 6-month unscheduled shutdown of the locks, heaven forbid, we have one lock that's working, would cost 11 million jobs. 11 million jobs and reduce our GDP by $1.1 trillion. So this is a big project. And we got the authorization, but we have to have the funding, which is what we've been working on to match it. And we worked together last year to reprogram Army Corps dollars to ensure that we had the funding necessary for the next steps. I'm so incredibly grateful for your partnership on this because we've kept it going. Now the stakes are even higher. Keeping the project on track starts with the President's budget, meeting the SU's full 2025 funding capability. And so to both of you, Mr. Connor, General Spellmon, can I count on your continued support to get this over the finish line, starting with the President's 2025 budget request?
For all the reasons, Senator, thank you very much. For all the reasons you just mentioned, it's a high priority, as you know, as we went through the process to ensure in a continuing resolution that we could still make a contract option so that we can keep the project moving forward and try and minimize additional cost increases. We are fully committed to moving forward. And the good news is on discussions about SULOCs, we engage everybody at the highest level of this government, not just in the Army Civil Works Program, but at the White House and OMB are involved. So we're committed to working through all these issues and continue to support the project.
Terrific. I appreciate it.
Ma'am,
Yes,
you have
please,
our
John.
commitment. This is a project of national significance. For everything Mr. Connor just said, we have great momentum, and we have $235 million in the President's budget. We're looking forward to getting that so we can keep that momentum going.
That's music to my ears. It's so important to be able to get that done. And let me also, another topic, Mr. Connor, you and I talk about a lot, which is Brandon Road. And there's this thing called carp, invasive carp, that wants to get into our Great Lakes, Mr. Chairman.
One of my relatives.
Yes, right. Invasive tom carp. No. We have these fish that we have, we've been looking for every way possible technically to hold these fish out of the Great Lakes. It would destroy the fishing ecosystems and basically the economy in many ways, and have found technically how to do that now. It's taken years to get to the point. How do you allow the barges up the river without the fish coming up the river? And so here we are right now in a situation where we are at a critical point, as you know. And we have the technology, we've actually got the funding, but we're in a step-by-step, day-to-day slip right now because of a project partnership agreement that's not been signed. And I'm asking you this, even though I know that our friends in Illinois, the state of Illinois needs to do this, and the state of Michigan is working with them now to get this done. But do I have your commitment to do everything in your power to make sure that we can get this PPA signed as soon as possible to get the construction going?
Senator, you absolutely have my commitment. Everything within our power to try and move this forward, to accommodate the issues raised by the state of Illinois, we're willing to do. If I thought going to Springfield and sitting in the office and working through issues would be helpful, I would do that because the project is as important as you reference. There are issues that have been raised in the course of those discussions that are outside of our authority. Congress has already adjusted cost share. We can't unilaterally go any further than what Congress has already gone. But I appreciate the need to move forward. I do also appreciate that it's my understanding the state of Michigan is now actively working with the state of Illinois. Anything I can do, the chief can do to facilitate those discussions and get us to a PPA so that we can use the $250 million that we have available to start that project, we're willing to do.
Terrific. And let me just say that the cost share is an issue. I know Senator Duckworth, a great member of this committee, and I are both interested in the next WRDA bill to be addressing that for the states. But quickly, I know I'm out of time, Mr. Chairman, but one idea that the state partners raised, I just wanted to get a quick response on, was expediting the project timeline by our allowing that remediation work be carried out at the same time of construction. What makes sense to me, if we're remediating something in terms of we think there's going to be some issues on some land, doing that while we're doing construction, if it saves money, if it saves time, does that make sense for us to make sure you can do that?
Senator, it makes absolute sense, and we run into this on many civil works projects, and we believe there's some potential legislation that could help us even in this upcoming WRDA to help us get after that.
I think it's really important, Mr. Chairman. I hope we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Spellmon. Senator Sullivan, thank you for your patience, and you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to compliment both the witnesses today, Ms. Secretary General. I think you guys are doing a great job. I think your responsiveness and understanding of all the different questions here has been very impressive, so thanks very much. I want to dig into some of the big projects in the great state of Alaska. You know, as I like to say, we're a resource-rich but infrastructure-poor state. Alaska has less road miles than Connecticut, and we are almost 120 times bigger than Connecticut. Mr. Chairman, just for your information, we have about twice as many roads than Delaware has, but we are 264 times bigger than Delaware. So we have a lot of catching up to do.
I'd like to say we're still growing, but actually as the sea level rises, you know, it's not looking good.
So first one, won't surprise either of you, Mr. Secretary, you've been great on this. This is the Donlan 404 permits. I just literally had a great meeting in D.C. with the leaders from the Chilista Native Corporation, what we call the YK Delta region, Yukon-Kuskokwim region. By the way, this is one of the poorest regions in the world, or I'm sorry, in America. Great Americans there, of course, are Alaska Native people principally. But as usual, we have what our Native people, what we refer to as the eco-colonialists. These are lower 48 environmental groups. Don't give a damn about the Native people. They come up, they file lawsuits trying to tell the Native people what's good for them. Eco-colonialists. We have a lot of eco-colonialists coming trying to hurt these communities. And as you know, this one is now fronted by Earth Justice, the latest eco-colonialists trying to harm Native people in Alaska. They have worked on this, going after this 404 permit that's now almost 6 years old that you guys have provided. I just want, once again, to get your commitment. Of course, you have to meet with these eco-colonialists, I understand, but not to reopen the Donlan 404 permit, and if there is litigation, to defend it. 6 years, coming back and trying to reopen something after 6 years, to me, that's not the rule of law. That turns us into, like, you know, a banana republic like Venezuela or something like that. So can I get both of your commitments? Mr. Secretary, you've given me this commitment a million times. I literally was asked by the great people of the region when they heard I had this hearing tomorrow to ask once again, so I said I will. By the way, the EPA administrator has been great on this too. He said we're not reopening it. Can I get your commitment once again?
Senator, I always appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation with you to reiterate my commitment. I know there are Alaska Natives on both sides of the issue.
Not many on the other side, trust me. I represent them. This has been driven by the eco-colonialists. I represent the Alaska Native people. The vast majority are supportive.
We have no basis to revisit that permit right now.
General?
Sir, General Gibbs and Colonel Palazzini talked to all of these groups. There is no intention to revisit any of the permit decisions that have been made.
Let me just go two other projects, big ones that you guys have just done a great job on. We had this district partnership, project partnership agreement that I actually went to the signing of, the North Slope Borough, for the Barrow, now called Utiavik Coastal Erosion Project, and then the project partnership agreement for the Port of Nome Expansion Project. These are funded significantly, thanks to all of you and the Congress, but they're still going to likely need continued funding. And can I get both of your commitments to not just, to make sure that once we get, you know, 2/3 of the way through, that we continue to get that funding. We will work on it. They're both very strategic. The Port of Nome, as you know, General, is really strategic. I was just down in the Armed Services hearing You had this joint Russian-Chinese naval task force off the coast of Alaska. Again this summer, 12 ships, very big, probing our territory, America's territory. We need a place where we can put Navy ships, icebreakers in the Arctic. Port of Nome is going to be able to do that. Can I get your commitment on both of those? They're good projects coming along well, and the partnership, the project partnership agreements that you guys have signed with the North Slope Borough, with the community of Nome have just been great, and I want to compliment you both again.
Senator, you're correct. They're good projects. I think it's instructive that we know so much about where the rock is in Alaska to try and manage the cost of these projects. Yes, you have our commitment.
And the rock, as you know, could be local, and that's going to reduce the cost. General?
Yes, sir. I've been to both of these projects, and you have our commitment. These are important. We want to finish what we start.
Great. Let me ask, Mr. Chairman, real quick, it actually relates to Senator Kelly, since I know he's next. But Senator Kelly and I are going to be introducing legislation soon. Our staffs are working together on this issue of contaminated lands for Native Americans. And it's a little bit different in Arizona than it is in Alaska. But as both of you know, the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, the federal government gave Congress provided 44 million acres of land to the Native people, set up our regional corporations, biggest indigenous peoples settlement probably in the history of the world, certainly in the history of America. And Mr. Chairman, you've been a great champion of this. A lot of that land was contaminated, right? So the federal government was like, here you go, Alaska Natives, here's your land. Oh, by the way, it's all polluted. Pretty bad. The chairman was great on a bill of mine a couple years ago where we said, hey, at a minimum, CERCLA doesn't require, you can't sue these native corporations under the federal government because the federal government actually gave them polluted land. So we fixed that idea on liability, which of course made sense. But we're working on some innovative cleanup ideas. And I just want to continue to work with your offices on the technical assistance that we need to bring our bill forward, hopefully get it in the WRDA bill, that would provide remediation efforts outside of the usual wetlands mitigation bank idea. And this would be the idea of, hey, go to clean up Alaska Native or Arizona tribal lands as part of a mitigation effort that's innovative, because look, in terms of the pollution in Alaska, the federal government is unlikely to be able to clean all that up. It's literally in the billions. So we're trying to find innovative solutions. This committee's done a really good job on addressing this in a bipartisan way. Senator Kelly and I, like I said, are working on that. Can I get your commitment to continue to work with my office, Senator Kelly's office, on some of these innovative solutions to do what we all want, which is clean up the lands of our first peoples in this country, who, by the way, are great patriotic Americans. They serve at higher rates in the military than any other ethnic group in the country.
Absolutely, you have my commitment. We need innovative ideas, and when we can restore the environment and take care of Native American issues, all the better.
Senator, we do a lot of cleanup, 1950 Area Atomic Energy Commission, nuclear waste cleanup across the country, a lot of work on formerly utilized defense sites, a lot of experienced staff in this area, and looking forward to working with you on the text.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Senator Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Sullivan. To expand a little bit on that, in Alaska and Arizona, clearly different. We have a lot of the same issues, though. Ours happen to be like arsenic in the water. I had a Hopi tribal member in my office just this morning, and he was talking specifically about the water he has access to has arsenic in it. We have over 500 abandoned uranium mines on the Navajo Nation. The Havasupai tribe's water is under threat of being contaminated, so we have multiple issues, and this legislation can go a long way to helping solve those. On a separate topic, I want to talk to you about managed aquifer recharge. I don't easily get frustrated. But more than a year after WRDA 2022 was signed into law, the Corps still hasn't issued guidance to explain how non-federal sponsors can partner with the Corps to carry out managed aquifer recharge projects. Now, this was authorized under Section 8108 of WRDA 2022. And as both of you may recall, this provision authorized three things. One, it required that the Corps carry out a national assessment on how to carry out aquifer recharge projects. Number two, it required that the Corps to establish a working group on managed aquifer recharge best practices. And three, it authorized the Corps to carry out managed aquifer recharge projects with non-federal sponsors. Now, as somebody who's championed these provisions, I want to note that all three of these are important, but the provisions aren't intended to be implemented independently. Mr. Connor, I noted you said in your testimony that the working group would take longer to stand up because it will be considered an advisory committee. But that does not explain why the Corps hasn't issued implementation guidance explaining how Army Corps districts can partner with local sponsors to carry out managed aquifer recharge projects as required in WRDA. And this delay is having real consequences. In Arizona, the city of Tucson reached out to the LA district nearly 6 months ago, and they've identified a project that would be a perfect match for this program. It would construct new groundwater recharge facilities and expand riparian habitat protection at the base of what's called A Mountain in the city of Tucson. And once constructed, this project could help the city of Tucson save 4,000 acre-feet of water a year. And look, I mean, time is of the essence here for Arizona. I mean, we're in a drought that's gone on for 20 years. It's the worst drought in 1,200 years. We had a good snowpack on the Colorado River last winter, so we've had a wet winter, and it's been wet in Tucson. Last winter, it's looking pretty good this winter. If we stand up groundwater recharge facilities quickly, we could build more resilience in what will certainly be a dry year next year or the year after. So it's critical to get this guidance and begin work on these groundwater recharge projects, especially in drought-stricken cities. So, Mr. Connor, when do you expect implementation guidance will be issued for the feasibility study portion of the Managed Aquifer Recharge Program, which is Section 8108B, and why is this taking so long?
Senator, 2 quick points. So the implementation guidance is still being drafted at this point in time. I'll commit to you to go and personally see what I can do to move it as quickly as possible so that we can move forward with that project. Because I agree with you, we want to be assisting these communities with respect to managed aquifer recharge. The second point I would just make is we are not waiting, though, to look for opportunities to support managed aquifer recharge. We're funding it through EI programs, Kyrene in your state, Southern California, we're doing the same thing. We're also managing facilities different, such as Prado Dam in Southern California. We're making releases differently of floodwater so they can be picked up by the local water district and put into their managed aquifer recharge system. So any opportunities, and I think we're doing the same thing at Lake Roosevelt now, trying to finish an EA to work with your water providers in your state. So we want to move forward, notwithstanding the guidance, but I understand the guidance is important. I will personally go back and see how quickly.
Well, I appreciate you doing that. When you say, you know, as soon as possible, what do you think that means? When could we get that implementation guidance, or maybe General, you could
Sir, I would just
expand on
add,
that.
we're not waiting on implementation guidance. We're already implementing this in the field, and I will follow up on the projects in Arizona. We need 3 things. At the core project, we need a water supply or water conservation authority. Our non-federal sponsors typically will conduct the retention basin below the dam. The most important thing we need is the water. And then the first time we saw this in California was really 2023, and we were able to make this use. We can move out with the guidance that we have, and I'll follow up with my team on the projects you mentioned in Arizona.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Kelly. Senator Mark, you're welcome back.
Thank you,
You're
Mr. Chairman.
persistent. We're glad you're here. Thanks.
Yeah, full attendance today.
at the committee, so you can see how this seniority system works. You got to get in line. So our flood management policy has historically failed to protect black, brown, and low-income communities. Instead, we've prioritized communities with the most expensive real estate and the highest incomes. This injustice is particularly worrisome at this moment, with climate change increasing the risks of extreme storms and flooding in the very communities that have been ignored and unprotected over the past century. Many communities in my home state of Massachusetts are facing these very same risks today. Leominster, for example, experienced weeks' worth of rain in just a few hours last September. Along the coast, communities like Dorchester, Chelsea, East Boston, and Revere have high annual flood risks that are increasing each and every year. And in the Merrimack Valley, extreme rain events have increased the likelihood of combined sewer overflows, which send untreated stormwater and wastewater through gateway cities like Lowell, Lawrence, and Haverhill into the Merrimack River. So in other words, the communities that are already most vulnerable will see a sea at their doorstep first. So Secretary Connor, by the way, thank you for your great work. Thank you, sir, for your great work as well. Do you agree that the Army Corps must ensure that black, brown, and low-income communities receive equitable investment from the Corps?
Senator, great question. Yes, I absolutely agree, and we are taking a number of actions that I can articulate if you would like me to.
If you can, yeah, maybe in a minute, give us the highlights.
Highlights, as the chairman just mentioned, we're moving forward with rulemaking to implement the principles, requirements, and guidelines. This is going to significantly change the Corps' planning process so that we look at maximizing benefits, public benefits, and we look at not just financial but economic and social benefits, and treat communities more fairly, equitably, and this will benefit rural communities, inner city communities, as well as tribal communities. We need to broaden the reach of the Corps. It's god-awful to say agency-specific procedures to implement PRNGs, but it's probably the most important institutionalizing approach that we will take here in the near term. There's also a number of pilot projects for economically disadvantaged communities to move forward, to do flood studies at 100% federal cost share, to do smaller cap continuing authorities projects for economically disadvantaged people.
Thank you. And I just want to highlight here that you have an environmental justice policy memo you issued in March of 2022, and I just want to congratulate you on that. So, thank you for continuing that great work. In 2023, it was a devastating year for flooding along the Connecticut River in Massachusetts. Flooding impacted some of the poorest communities, gateway cities, many vulnerable farmers who keep us all fed. An inspiring coalition of towns along the Connecticut River banding together to find a regional solution to this threat, but they would greatly benefit from federal support. In this upcoming Water Resources Development Act, which the chairman and the ranking member are putting together, I'm working to advance several Army Corps Connecticut River flood mitigation projects in communities like East Hampton and Northampton, as well as a broader flood mitigation strategy for all the communities impacted by the flooding. So, General Spellmon, do you agree the Army Corps has an important role to play here to mitigate this regional flood risk posed by the Connecticut River?
Senator, yes, and I would just acknowledge the incredible precipitation that your state has been receiving. Section 216, review of completed civil works projects, would be the appropriate authority here. This system's 80 years old. It deserves a relook. And we have a provision already, 8156 in Word of 22, that allows us to move out on the federal interest determination, federal expense for the first $200K, and we'll seek those funds when we receive an appropriation here in '24, sir.
Yeah, in general, our rains have been biblical, just absolutely unbelievable. And then, Secretary Connor, thank you for all your work on the Cape Cod bridges. Just want to note that in the hearing. Much appreciated.
Thank you for your leadership, Senator.
Thank you, sir. And finally, and quickly, I'd also like to highlight an important project in North Adams, Massachusetts. In the 2022 Water Resources Development Act, we successfully authorized a study to improve flood management of the Hoosick River. The river cuts through the center of this small city, North Adams, and endangers both lives and property. So I would just encourage the Army Corps to dedicate the necessary funding to complete it. So that's just a request that I make
Yes, sir.
to both of you. Okay.
Thank you both. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, thanks for coming back and joining us and for your persistence. Senator Cardin is recognized.
Thank you.
And in the on-deck circle, sitting down in the on-deck circle right now is Senator Whitehouse. Welcome.
Mr. Chairman.
He's, I think, the 16th member of our committee who's actually
This
shown
is
up.
one
That
of
might
our
be a high water
favorite
mark.
hearings. I want you to know that. We look forward to this. I apologize. I chaired the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and I had to deal with Iran. I much prefer to deal with the Army Corps issues than Iran. So thank you for this hearing going on for as long as it's gone on. But this is really an opportunity for us to deal with some of the important issues. And first, a thank you. Mid-Bay is well underway, as you all know, following up on Poplar Island for environmental restoration. It's incredible how Poplar Island has been received, not just in our region, but around, I think, literally the world. There's a successful environmental restoration of a previously habitable island in the Chesapeake Bay that now has been restored and used for dredge materials. So it's a beneficial use. Well, the next is Mid-Bay. And the good news is Mid-Bay, last year we got the funding to get it started. Thank you very much for the strong support that we have. Now we need to make sure that we follow up with the construction dollars because it's a multi-year effort. And I thank, again, the Army Corps for all of its work in making this a reality. It's, I think, one of the great legacies of Senator Sarbanes in establishing this program, and it's now being copied. So thank you very much. I want to go to one that we do need word authorization. That's the Secret Loop Channel. That's critically important. I've watched as vessels try to maneuver getting in and out of the piers, and we know we're getting larger, and it's a safety issue, it's a time issue. So, General Spellmon, if I might, could you just comment on the importance of the Secret Loop Channel to the commerce of our Port of Baltimore?
Yes, sir. Incredibly important. We signed this chief's report, and it's up for Congress's consideration in Word of 24. This is a 50-foot deepening, and what that's going to allow us to do is avoid these three-point terms that these large post-Panamax vessels have to do. Very risky to do. So, very important project. In fact, we went there to roll out our 23 budget. Secretary Connor and I go to different projects that are important to the nation. We rolled out our 23 budget from Seagirt. We look forward to getting into construction for that one, sir.
Senator Connor, you're welcome back anytime. We'll make sure, in fact, if we get this loop fixed, we'll be able to get our vessels in faster and we'll be able to show you more action. So please come on back and visit us. So thank you for that. I appreciate that very much.
Absolutely, Senator. I look forward to that. I really want to get out to Poplar and mid-Chesapeake.
It's becoming somewhat of a tourist attraction. People are really, and understand it's incredible for bird watching and for, so it's a popular spot now. So I want to mention one other issue. In Word of 22, we got an authorization for environmental infrastructure projects for the state of Maryland. There's now a lot of interest in moving forward on that. And I'm just going to ask your cooperation as we try to develop a strategy to implement that authorization in a way consistent with congressional authority and appropriations, but in a meaningful way to carry out a Word of 22. So you all help us doing that?
Yes, sir, absolutely. I mean, Colonel Pinchason, as you know, has been going to the Association of County meeting for the 24 counties and a lot of interest. I believe we have letters of intent on about $53 million worth of work, and this is just one of those cases where there's absolutely more need than space in the budget. That's something we've got to work on.
Absolutely committed to the program. As you know, the appropriations process is going to be key, as it has been with all environmental infrastructure, and we're taxing the limits of that program now, but this is a really good work that's being done.
And let me just put a good word in for Colonel Pinchason. She does a fabulous job on behalf of the Army Corps, and she is so engaged with the community, which makes our jobs as members of the Senate a lot easier. So thank you very much for all your services.
Senator Cardin, thanks for getting over here and joining us as well. Senator Whitehouse, we have, just for our witness, we have 20 members who serve on this committee. So far, 16 have arrived here and asked questions, participated.
Before they didn't show up, can we have their money?
Can't have their money, but you can have their time.
Thank you, Chairman.
Tell them welcome.
Thank you both for being here. I think I'll take my time to go through a punch list of Rhode Island related projects that I'd like to keep focus on, from very small to very, very large. The small one is industrial era pilings around India Point, along the Providence and East Providence shore, which we have been trying to clear out for many, many years. And a few have been pulled out in relation to a small defunct bridge removal that took place, but we'd like to get the rest of it going. So there's one. The second is there is a sunken tugboat not far south from where those pilings are, and the Department of Environmental Management has been requesting information from the Corps for several months now about the permit to remove that sunken tugboat. I'd like to get attention to that so that they have an answer and can plan accordingly. Providence, our capital city, sits in a sort of shallow declivity and is extremely vulnerable to flooding, particularly as we face increasing threats of sea level rise. I think we're 1 trillion tons off of the Greenland ice sheet, which has consequences. And at the moment, you all are looking at the Fox Point hurricane barrier to, among other things, see if it's adequate to meet the new risk that climate change and global warming and fossil fuel emissions have caused. And stacked right behind that, in terms of our Rhode Island needs, is the prospect of potentially having to move south further to the Fields Point area to construct a larger, more survivable hurricane barrier there. And we're going to need to have some pretty serious thinking. It would be an enormous public works project, not on the scale of protecting Boston by having to build an entire dike around the area through the islands and the harbor and all. We're narrower. We have you can kind of put a barrier across, but it's going to be a complicated project, and it's got to allow for, it has to be able to move a little bit because there's flow back and forth, tidal flow and river flow, and flow of sea creatures and all of that. So we really need to move that along. It's pretty important. And while the Fox Point thing is important to get done, the really important one is probably going to be the Fields Point barrier, because it looks like the sea level rise projections are going to make the Fox Point barrier have a fairly short, effective further period of life, even if it's improved. So that's another important project to us in Rhode Island, because we don't want our capital city flooded, and we certainly don't want it flooded because the Army Corps of Engineers didn't prepare in time to have the studies in place so that we could do the work to get the protection built. And the last thing is, I have been badgering the Army Corps for a long time about the discrepancy between what the coastal and inland flooding accounts spend on coastal versus inland flooding. On a good year, it's 20 times on inland flooding what it is on coastal funding. In a bad year for us coastal states, it's 100 times on inland flooding what it spends on coastal flooding. And when you look again at sea level rise and what is happening, the idea that a 100 to 1 or 20 to 1 discrepancy persists, I think, completely misses the risk profile of our oceans and coasts. So I would urge your eager, willing, and forthcoming cooperation with the GAO study that's trying to quantify all of that. So there's my punch list, and I've got 12 seconds left.
Sir, I'll be real quick. Sir, on the first India Point Bridge, we'll complete with the work on the pilings by the end of next month. Sir, the sunken tugboat,
I
I'm not,
understand that that's a narrow little set of pilings compared to the work that we want to accomplish. Those are only the ones in the immediate vicinity of the torn-down bridge.
sir, that's correct, and that's where we believe the authority takes us. Sir, the second one, the sunken tugboat, I am not familiar with. I'll follow up with Colonel Pabus right after this meeting. Sir, the coast, the Rhode Island coastline study, that's a chief's report. I signed that in September. It's ready for Congress's consideration in this WRDA bill, and that will work to get after some of the challenges that you mentioned. We want to incorporate natural and nature-based features, but also the hard concrete and steel that you mentioned at Fox Point Hurricane Barrier, which I've been to. I have not been to Fields Point Barrier, but yeah.
There isn't one yet.
Or to that
but I
part of
think
the-
it's where we need to go, and we need to do like the bathymetric surveys and the, making sure we know what the geology is down below, so that when we start to plan, we're planning off of a known physical geography.
Yes, sir. And so this last answer won't be sufficient and won't satisfy you. We do have 60 coastal storm risk management projects ongoing in the Corps right now that you have funded, Congress has funded to the tune of about just under $8 billion. And so we're looking forward to getting that work in the ground. And I know that's just a start.
Great. And we have a very good relationship with your local office, and we'll keep banging away to get these things done. But I want to take the opportunity while I have you both here to put a pin on each one of those so that you're aware of their importance to my state and to me. Thank you.
Senator Whitehouse, thanks for joining us. We have 20 members of our committee in all, equally divided with Democrats and Republicans, and they have shown up in numbers. And a number of them lead committees, major committees, including Senator Whitehouse, Senator Cardin, and they've found time to come here. I must say I'm, as always, impressed by the depth of their knowledge of the needs of their respective states that fall into the purview of the Army Corps of Engineers. Pretty amazing, given the breadth of the issues that we are charged with staying on top of here in the Senate. The other thing that really impresses me is the depth of your knowledge and the whole range of issues that have been asked from east to west, north to south, all the way up to Alaska. And it's very encouraging and frankly impressive. So I thank you for that. I'm going to ask a question for the record. We have a vote underway, and they want me to come and vote on the floor, so I better go. They'll take away my membership, or maybe not. But maybe on June 5th, January 5th, they'll take it away or something like that. But anyway, I'm going to ask a question for the record. And the question is that we'd appreciate hearing both of your perspectives on the Corps' priorities for WRDA 2024. We'd like to have that in writing rather than verbally. Any last words you'd like to just, we don't always give you, our witnesses a closing statement, but just something fairly brief, both of you, please, General.
Sir, on the WRDA priorities, I would just, first of all, I want to say thanks for all of the tools that you have given us. You have our commitment to work hard to get those more efficiently in the ground and being applied in the field. So I would just offer two for this next WRDA. I think that would help us immensely. I think Section 1001 of WRDA 14, that brought us 3x3, and that's done a lot of good for my agency. I would just respectfully ask Congress to reconsider the $3 million aspect of that in this. The buying power is not the same as it was a decade ago.
Okay.
And sort of the second one, and some of it came up today on Brandon Road, but there are other projects. I think all of us would benefit in an ability for the Army Corps of Engineers to assist our non-federal sponsors with HTRW cleanup. This happens in many, many civil works projects, but we would like to do that in a way that does not incur federal liability on those projects as we do that work. There's just many applications out there. I think that would help delivery of some pretty complicated projects.
All right, thank you. Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, we'll respond on the record with those priorities. I'm happy to have a discussion with your staff anytime. Mostly, I want to say thank you very much for your leadership and your service here in charge of this committee and everything you've done from bipartisan infrastructure law to ability to work and magically get WRDA authorizations legislation through in a timely manner. It's incredibly important. We try and identify impediments, as General Spellman just did, with respect to being successful in implementing projects. Every 2 years, getting those provisions which help us clean up and move forward because of lessons learned is incredibly important. Thank you very much to you, Ranking Member Capito, and the staff on both sides of the aisle. Just we're available anytime for your needs.
Thank you for that. When I think they're calling me to come ASAP to vote. Can you find the closing statement, while they find? So saying all politics is local. That's I think Tip O'Neill. Another all politics is personal, and that's from Joe Biden. And both of them are right. Again, the breadth of the issues here and the kind of focus on a lot of important points, but some that are rather obscure, and to hear how knowledgeable my colleagues are, and frankly, the both of you and your team is quite impressive. But I want to thank, in closing, our witnesses for joining us today for what I think is really important work the Army Corps of Engineers is doing in conjunction with us and the administration. We deeply appreciate your insights and testimony this morning. WRDA 2024 will continue to advance the Army Corps' critical work. And as we continue to develop this legislation, we also look forward to continuing the conversation about improving implementation of past WRDAs. And with that, some final housekeeping to close our hearing. Senators will be allowed to submit the questions for the record through the close of business on Wednesday, March 13th. And we'll compile those questions, send them on to our witnesses, and ask for our witnesses to reply by Wednesday, March 27th. And in closing, I want to just, I'd be remiss if I didn't say a special thank and shout out to our teams, the folks that sit behind us, but the folks that are part of the majority and minority on the Environment and Public Works Committee. We couldn't do this without the great support that you're providing us. And with that, this hearing is adjourned. Thank you all very much.